Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to tell you about the 26 nonfiction books I'm making a priority to read in 2026. If you've been around my channel for really any length of time, you probably know that this is something I've been doing for a few years now. I make a list of nonfiction books for the upcoming year, and then during that year, I slowly chip away at my list. And I keep doing it year after year because I find it works really well for me. Sure, I do come across the occasional book that doesn't work for me, but the majority of the time, having this list the entire year long really helps me keep on track. It encourages me to pick up nonfiction books that I've been meaning to read for a really long time. I have been matching the number of books to the year every single year, 26 in 2026. I do realize I will eventually have to stop doing that because come the 2030s, I'll probably be biting off more than I can chew with this project. But for now, it's working out fine. I'll read about 2 per month. Some months I'll have to read 3, and I find that totally manageable. Now, when I was putting together this list, I did try to prioritize books that I already own. I am trying to clear off some shelf space, but then I also selected some books that have been sitting on my virtual shelves over on Goodreads for years. I did pick some books by authors that I already know I love, so those are pretty safe bets, but then I did pick some new to me authors. I tried to pick some books that I know other readers love because I would love to find out what they love about these books. I also tried to pick a pretty wide variety of subgenres of nonfiction. I wanted to make sure there was a little bit of this and a little bit of that, not just because I enjoy a good variety in my reading diet, and I would like this list to have breadth to it, but also because I like to match the reading that I do to the season that we're in here in the Northern Hemisphere. So depending on what season we're in, I want to read something different, and I'm going to be working on this list from January until December, and I want to keep my reading humming along nicely no matter where in the year we happen to be. But without any further ado, let's take a look at the list. I'll begin by showing a more lighthearted one because there are definitely some darker books to talk about later in this video. But first up is Retromania, Pop Culture's Addiction to Its Own Past by Simon Reynolds. And this is a book that poses the question, why are we so obsessed with going back to things that were popular in prior decades? And it also wonders, what's going to happen if we ever run out of fads to circle back to? It has been a very interesting experience seeing Gen Z pine for the 90s and the early 2000s. It was quite the time to be alive, I can't lie about it. But I think seeing those popular styles that were all the rage during my youth come back into style again was on my mind when I pulled this off of my bookshelf. But speaking of pop culture, I also intend to read The Planets by Dava Sobol, which is a history of our solar system, but through the lens of pop culture. So it discusses things like astrology, mythology, poetry, music, and so on and so forth. So much less straight science and more a history of our understanding of our own solar system. I am a dabbler in astronomy myself. I find it all very interesting, but I also find it incredibly hard to understand. And so I really like this kind of playful approach to it. I think it's the main reason why I enjoyed The Milky Way by Moya McTeer so much. I reviewed that here on my channel if you're interested, and I'm hoping I like this one just as much as I liked that one. Next up is one that has been languishing on my shelves, unread, for years. So it's time I finally read A History of the World in 6 Glasses by Tom Standage. This is a very unique history of humanity told through our relationship with 6 different liquids: beer, wine, spirits, tea, coffee, and cola. I am one of those people that has multiple beverages around me at pretty much all times, different ones depending on what time of day we're talking about. That's probably what attracted me to this book all of those moons ago, and I'm excited to finally dig into this. A faster-paced work of adventure nonfiction on my list for 2026 is called The Emerald Mile, the epic story of the fastest ride in history through the heart of the Grand Canyon by Kevin Fedarko. And this is the heart-pounding story of a whitewater rafting trip through the Grand Canyon that apparently kind of doubles as a love letter to the Colorado River. I'm normally really in the mood for this kind of a book during the summer months, and this one has fantastic reviews. Next up, I have the first, more serious in tone work of history on my list, and that's When Crack Was King, A People's History of a Misunderstood Era by Donovan X. Ramsey. And this is a history of an under-examined crisis within American history, the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s and 90s. But from what I hear about this book, this isn't just a high-level overview of the situation. We actually follow 4 real people who were affected by this crisis. And I've heard this book is incredibly well done. I also wanted to include a couple of biographies on my list for 2026, and the first one I picked is actually a Pulitzer Prize winner. I didn't know it was until I went to go look it up. It's Vera by Stacy Schiff, who is a repeat author for me. I've read a number of her books previously. Her book, The Witches, was on my list for 2025, but this year I wanted to take on her biography of Vera Nabokov, wife of Vladimir Nabokov, who is probably most famous for being the author of Lolita. And this book apparently doubles as an examination of their 52-year-long marriage. That's a really long time to be married to someone, and Vladimir actually once said that without his wife, he never would have written a single thing. I can't wait to read this and find out why. But the other biography I definitely want to get to in 2026 is called Stalin's Daughter, The Extraordinary and Tumultuous Life of Svetlana Alliluyeva by Rosemary Sullivan. And the title of this one pretty much sums it up. This is the life story of the daughter of the infamous Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who was nearly as hard on his own family as he was the people he ruled over. Thus, this is bound to be a pretty tragic read. Let's lighten the mood a little bit with a little bit of art/history, not to be confused with art history. This is actually the history of an art museum. Rogues Gallery, the secret history behind the moguls and the money that made the Metropolitan Museum by Michael Gross. This book gives the background behind one of America's greatest, certainly its wealthiest art museums, the Met in New York City, and all of the people behind the scenes that built it up to what it is now. Believe it or not, I've actually never been there. I really want to visit because I would love to see the portrait of Madame X by John Singer Sargent in person. But I thought knowing a little bit more about the museum ahead of a visit there would maybe add to the experience. Or ruin it. I guess we'll find out. Another cultural pick I selected for 2026 is called A Mad Love, An Introduction to Opera by Vivian Schweitzer. And this is a book I actually bought off of the recommendation of a viewer who suggested that this was a good place to start with this emotional and dramatic art form. I was looking for something accessible since I know next to nothing about opera, but I guess that won't be true anymore after I read this. But back to an intimidating one. I am finally going to take on Robert Sapolsky's 800-page behemoth, Behave, the biology of humans at our best and worst. This is an interdisciplinary, comprehensive breakdown of human behavior that took this neuroscientist author over a decade to write. I'm going to have to set aside a good chunk of time to get through this one, but I'm positive it'll be worth it. And I'm sure what I learned in that previous book will go on to help me more deeply understand other nonfiction titles that I read, including books on my 2026 list, like We Were Once a Family, a story of love, death, and child removal in America by Roxana Asgharian. This book tells the story of the deaths of 6 adopted children in 2018. It was a shocking situation, but it goes further and serves as an indictment of the entire American foster care system, which is a topic I have a special interest in. Up to this point in the video, the majority of authors that I've spoken about have been new to me authors, with the exception of Stacy Schiff, of course. But now I want to switch focus. I want to talk about the repeat authors on my list. These are authors who I've read before. I really like their work. I really respect what they do, which is why I'm slowly working my way through all of their back catalogs. And one of those authors is Ruth Reichl. Last year on my 2025 list, I read Tender at the Bone. And so in 2026, I want to read the next memoir that's effectively the sequel to Tender at the Bone, Comfort Me with Apples. This one picks up right where Tender at the Bone left off in 1978. We get even more food-related life stories from the woman who would go on to become the restaurant critic for the New York Times and then later the editor of Gourmet magazine. I'm so excited to read this, but I really don't know what I'm going to do with myself once I've run out of Ruth Rachel memoirs to read. The same goes for Michael Lewis, who is the author of some very big-name nonfiction books, mainly finance-focused ones like The Big Short, for example. I've read most of his books now, but I haven't read his latest, Going Infinite: The Rise and Fall of a New Tycoon. And this book seems to be a character study or even a kind of psychological dissection of this man, a CEO of a now defunct cryptocurrency exchange company. This is a very current topic, obviously very relevant in our modern day. However, I've heard that the author is a little bit bootlicky in this one, but I guess I'll find out when I read it. It's been a couple of years now since I picked up a work by Svetlana Alexievich. If you don't know anything about her books, she writes these oral histories that deep dive into specific topics, devastating topics within Soviet history. They're some of the most well-done works of nonfiction you will ever read. However, emotionally, they fillet you like a fish. Therefore, I like to put a couple of years in between my readings of her books just so I can somewhat recover from the previous one before moving on to another one and going through that again. So back in 2023, I was willingly ripped open by Voices from Chernobyl. So for 2026, I'm planning to read The Unwomanly Face of War, an oral history of women in World War II. Like her other books do, this book collects interviews with real people who lived through a common event. In this case, it's women who contributed in some way to the war effort during World War II. So they talk about what they did during the war, how they contributed, but then the traumas that they had to carry most of the time silently through the rest of their lives. And also in some cases, the horrible ways that they were treated once they were expected to go back to their lives post-war. I know this is going to be incredibly upsetting to read. Her books always are. I'm going to have to prepare myself for it. But I also know that this is destined to become one of my top books of the year. Her books always are. So I'm just going to save this one a spot on my top nonfiction books of 2026 list already. Voices from Chernobyl isn't my only favorite nonfiction pick of 2023 to inspire a book on this list, though, because back in 2023, I loved Killers of the Flower Moon. I was so impressed by it that I've gone on to read pretty much everything else by David Grann, except for The Lost City of Z, a tale of deadly obsession in the Amazon. This book tells the story of a British geographer who disappeared as he was hunting in the Amazon for the ruins of this rumored ancient lost city. And the author weaves in his own travel experiences in the Amazon where this man would have been exploring. I already have so much respect for this author. I am sure this is going to be a tremendous read. And also I hear it has a really good movie adaptation that I can watch once I finish it. The next repeat author on my list is Michael Pollan, who is quickly becoming a new favorite author of mine. His most recently published book, This Is Your Mind on Plants, is the one that's on my list for 2026. This book does a deep dive into 3 mind-altering substances that are derived from plants: caffeine, opium, and mescaline. This is a history of those substances, but also of the governmental regulations over them, how those regulations have shaped our interactions with these substances, and also our opinions on these substances. I am a big fan of caffeine, but I know substantially less about the other 2, so I am sure this will be a learning experience, and probably a very enjoyable one given how much I've loved his previous books. But then the next book on my list also centers on plants, on a specific tree. More specifically, it's called The Golden Spruce, a true story of myth, madness, and greed by John Valiant. This is a book that seems to blend history and environmentalism. It focuses on a very specific region on the west coast of Alaska and Canada. We learn about the exports of this region, like otter skins and lumber. We learn about its native population. But then it all seems to culminate in this really wild story of a man who, for some reason, cut down this almost mythical tree called the Golden Spruce, and the devastating ripple effect that had throughout this community. Like many other people, I really enjoyed his book, The Tiger. I was actually recently reminded of that book because John Valiant wrote the introduction to a different book on tigers that I read and reviewed here on my channel recently. But also, I was very, very impressed by his book Fireweather. It was on my 2025 list. So my expectations for this one are sky high. The last repeat author on my list might just be my favorite of all, and I love all of these authors quite a bit, so you know he is something special. My all-time favorite nature writer, Tor Hansen, has a new book out that I haven't read yet. I don't know how that happened, but in 2026, I will definitely be reading Close to Home, The Wonders of Nature Just Outside Your Door. This book pays some much-needed attention to often overlooked pieces of nature that we frequently see in our backyards and in our parks, but we don't pay that close attention to because they are so commonplace. I am so excited to read this because, no joke, I have loved every single thing this man has ever written. That's not hyperbole. I have given 5 stars to every single one of his books, and I am really picky. So I'm in for a treat when I pick this up. But a nature writer who I haven't read anything from yet, but who I've been meaning to try, is Barry Lopez. And the one I selected for 2026 is Arctic Dreams. The reason why I picked this one is that it won the National Book Award for Nonfiction back in 1986, so 2026 will mark the 40th anniversary of its win. I thought that was kind of fun. This book is an examination of the inhospitable Arctic, its wildlife, its landscapes, its natural phenomena. I'm definitely going to save this one for a winter month. One I'm probably going to start the year off with, though, is Anything Goes by Lucy Moore, a so-called biography of the Roaring Twenties, the 1920s, a decade full of glitz, glamour, and plenty of hardship. I thought this one would make an interesting addition to this list since we are currently living in this century's edition of the 20s. For some more American history, I also plan to read Mayflower, a story of courage, community, and war by Nathaniel Philbrick, who is another author I surprisingly have never read before. This is, of course, a history of the crossing of the boat, the Mayflower, and then the settlement of Plymouth Colony. And it's really good to know that if I enjoy this, I have Nathaniel Philbrick's entire back catalog to go through. I don't have many memoirs on my list for 2026, but one I do plan on reading is called The Girl Who Smiled Beads, a story of war and what comes after by Clementine Wamaria and Elizabeth Weil. This was written by a woman who was a young child when the Rwandan genocide happened back in the mid-90s. After that, she and her sister spent a number of years wandering across Africa as refugees before ultimately being granted asylum in the United States, where they built a new life. Back when I was in college, I took a peace and conflict resolution class, during which we pretty extensively studied and discussed this time in Rwandan history. And I'm not unfamiliar with dark things. I studied Russian and Soviet history. That's just monster after monster after monster. So it's not something I'm necessarily uncomfortable with. But the situation in Rwanda affects me in the way that really nothing else does. Perhaps it's because we saw actual footage of it, not just the movie adaptation, not just Hotel Rwanda, but actual helicopter footage of this happening. And it has absolutely never left me. And if I feel that way, as someone thousands of miles away, I can't imagine what it must feel like to be a survivor or to travel across the world to start a new life after this has happened to you, your family, your home country. So my heart goes out to this author, and I've not even touched this book yet. Something I know much less about is the focus of the next book on my list, The House of Wisdom: How Arabic Science Saved Ancient Knowledge and Gave Us the Renaissance by Jim Al-Khalili. And this book examines how many of the scientific innovations we may think of as coming from the Western world actually had their roots in the Islamic world and went on to play a role in sparking the European Renaissance. I have a feeling so much of the information in this book is going to blow my mind. I've also been meaning to read The Invention of Miracles, Language, Power, and Alexander Graham Bell's Quest to End Deafness by Katie Booth ever since 2022 when I saw this author give a presentation at the Greater Pittsburgh Festival of Books. This is a history of how Alexander Graham Bell, who is most known for inventing the telephone, also did a tremendous amount of harm during his lifetime by figuratively going to war with the deaf community, trying to take away their right to sign language. And it seemed to be personal because he was the son of a deaf mother and then went on to marry a different deaf woman. Before hearing this author's presentation, I knew nothing about this story, and I am sure reading this is going to cast this American icon in a whole new light for me. I figured I'd speak about this next book on my list immediately after that previous one, since deafness can often be hereditary. I don't seem to be able to resist putting books on genetics on my list every year. I find it fascinating. So the one I selected for 2026 is called The Carriers: What the Fragile X Gene Reveals About Family, Heredity, and Scientific Discovery by Anne Somorowski. This is a book about a rare disease called Fragile X syndrome, which seems to change as it's passed down through the generations. But it's more than just about the science of this little-known genetic condition. We also meet people, families who have been affected by it, so it has a more personal touch to it as well. This is another area that I had zero knowledge of before hearing about this book. And then the final book on my list for 2026 is called The Education of a Coroner: Lessons in Investigating Death by John Bateson. This is a memoir of a man who spent 36 years working in a coroner's office, first as a death investigator and then later on as the coroner. And in this book, he discusses his career as a whole, as well as some notable cases. As you can probably tell from this entire list, I read about a wide variety of topics within nonfiction, including some that are on the more macabre side, which I tend to like to pick up as the autumn rolls around. But there you have it. Those are the 26 nonfiction books that I intend to prioritize over the calendar year of 2026. These won't be all the nonfiction books I read next year. I normally read 100 plus books a year, and over half of what I read is nonfiction. I think it's kind of a 60-40 split in favor of nonfiction, so I will read probably over 60 nonfiction books next year. These are simply the ones that I wanted to earmark as being important to read before 2027 gets here. If you've read any of the books I spoke about today, please let me know what you thought of them. I'm not going to make any changes to this list. I have finalized it. Things get a little too complicated if I change it around too much, especially after my video is made. But I do like to know what I'm getting myself into. So if you have any thoughts to share, I would love to hear those in the comment section below. Also, let me know if any of these books have made their way onto your TBR after hearing about them in this video. And if you're interested in reading any of these along with me, of course, feel free to do so independently. But if there are any that you would like to do as a group read, if we can get a consensus down in the comments of one or maybe even two titles that everyone would like to read together, I would be happy to arrange a group read. But I can't do that unless I know which one you would like to read, so let me know. All the books I spoke about today are listed and linked for you in the description box below for your clicking convenience. If you're curious what books made my previous year's lists, I have made a playlist containing all the ones I've done up to this point. It will contain all the ones I do in the future. I will pop that up in the cards, and also I'll put a link in the description box below. And at the very bottom of that exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internet. So Goodreads, Instagram, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I am reading and doing right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.